hate to disagree with the esteemed Mr. Moore, but we're going to talk about programmatic television, which he says won't be done for a long time. It's a frontier, there's no question about it. I'm Dave Smith. I'm CEO and founder of Mediasmith, a digital media agency in San Francisco. I've got with me all parts of the infrastructure of the television industry. We tried to recruit some folks from Europe, but we got a big pass, but we're going to try to deal with the US and Europe in this conversation. We've got representing the inventory side, Larry Allen from Turner. We've got representing buying infrastructure, Tim Sims from the trade desk. We've got representing the buy side, but he will be first to tell you that he also represents the sell side, Dave Moore from Xaxis. And we've got... I used to have a client called Xaxis. They were the first ones that we ever put on the internet. And I haven't uttered that word for a long time. I'm so sorry, Dave. Dave Moore from Xaxis. They're a major sponsor here, folks. Xaxis, right up there, okay? How am I doing so far, Dave?
So far.
Yeah. And Chris O'Hara from Krux. Did I get that right, Chris?
You got it.
Okay, yeah, all right. Good.
Big spots.
Yeah. Yeah, he's over there. Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. So, first thing I want to talk about is this term, programmatic TV. There's a lot of companies, or a number of them, who say they're doing programmatic TV today. And I think in the conversations I've had with you folks, you would disagree whether they're really doing programmatic TV. And let's talk just for a short time about what is being done right now and what we should really call that. And then if we get to programmatic, what we should call that. Larry, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So, programmatic TV is best case programmanual, I think is what a lot of us are calling it these days, where, clients and their agencies through a DSP is able to evaluate some available inventory that a supplier has made kind of apparent in their system, but certainly the actual process of buying the inventory and then ultimately delivering the creative is far from automatic. So I think the best case is really giving the buyer the ability to see some available inventory and potentially put some planning around that and automating that piece of the process. So the workflow that goes into planning, but the actual buying transaction is nothing more than submitting an order that we then evaluate and review and try to determine if it's going to create good yield for our business.
Tim, do you have an observation on that? Any different?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, Dave put the spectrum up before. And I think that's really important to note when you talk about where are we with programmatic television or advanced TV, whatever we're going to call it as an industry. Because I think if you look at that spectrum, you've got one end of it where there is some fairly significant automation. So you can buy OTT inventory, you can buy individual apps through OTT, whether it's Sony Crackle or whatever it might be, in a fairly automated fashion. Many of these guys have adopted SSP infrastructure to help deliver that to platforms like ours on the buy side. So there are some things that look very similar to what programmatic looks like in digital video. So I think on that end of the spectrum, programmatic's probably an appropriate term. As you go to the other end of the spectrum, on the linear side, I think what Larry's saying is very, very true as well. I think there's much more workflow automation and program manual on the linear end, and then on the stuff that looks a little bit more like digital video, I think programmatic's probably a more appropriate term. So depending on where you land on that spectrum, I think the word programmatic takes on a very different meaning.
Yeah, program manual is not a very sexy term.
No.
No.
Should we not coin that right here?
Yeah.
I always felt that what we developed in the digital arena, the processes and the way that we place ads would set the standard for all other media as it became addressable. So I completely agree with what my friend Dave Morgan said. If you compare programmatic television to programmatic digital, there's no comparison. And frankly, what's programmatic mean? Does anybody know who came up with the term programmatic? I don't, but it means automation. So is there programmatic television today? Absolutely. Is it the same sort of programmatic that we have in digital? Not even close.
Okay?
Thanks.
If you got something to add, otherwise.
No, you can go to the next one.
So, when is the inventory really going to come online? When do we think we're talking about there's a little bit of inventory that we can buy now, right? But we've got, in the U.S., NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, they control a lot of the inventory. And then there's another tier, which is Turner and CNN and all of those properties. When are these things going to come up so it's not just OTT and not just leftover spot inventory, so that we've really got something to talk about? Dave Morgan said a number of years. Is it really going to be that far off?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a while. I mean, we work with over-the-top companies like Samba and Roku and power HBO Go and do some data inside of the Turner data cloud. But I think, as Dave was mentioning, if you look at the size of the addressable audiences there, we ingest a lot of audience data from Roku, but if a marketer like Anheuser-Busch wants to go and find scale or reach, even across multiple OTTs, it's just an exercise in cat herding, and at the end of the day, the scale may add up to 2%. I think what can be programmatic and what's interesting is if you look at an Anheuser-Busch, they're trying to create sort of a golden record of consumers and bring in all their data across. And the initial way they thought about audience was fully linear, and that was all about demo. And then they went and bought demo across linear, and that was good, but not close enough. And then they got into the digital space, and they sort of associated those demos with contextual and behavioral segments, and they found, not just women, but women who were interested in, who did the shopping for the family every Thursday night. But now almost every big marketer we work with, whether it's Kellogg's or Conagra or Heineken or Mondelez, they want to look at the purchase-based target. And what Dave Morgan was saying is, how do you associate a real purchase, a real-life transaction, take that first-party data, and apply it somewhere where you can build a brand and tell a great story and get some scale? And I think we're getting there to a certain extent. I know we're doing it in digital, programmatically building audiences, but we can't connect those audiences to where the people are, and that's kind of the issue right now.
And we don't have the infrastructure to serve an ad when we decide to buy it, right?
Not at all.
Yeah. What about your inventory? When are you guys going to put that inventory up for us to grab on this automated menu system?
So today we're building audience-based schedules for clients. We have a predictive model that it helps us bring in the first-party data of the client, marry it up with viewing behavior. We then predict a quarter out when we believe that audience is going to watch certain shows at a 30-minute time block. That gives us a lot of capability to then drive efficiency for the client. That all is done in an automated fashion internally today. What we're looking at is how we can make those packages, if you will, of audiences viewable inside of a platform like Nix. And that would then create a lot of value for the buyer to have some transparency into where my audiences are at what time blocks. And then also for us, we use it as a yield strategy. So as Dave Morgan was mentioning, there is scarcity, and we have to figure out how to best utilize our inventory for our best clients. And by marrying their audience with our content, we can actually achieve that and create some more value for our business.
Yeah, I would say, actually, there's already plenty of inventory available, particularly in cable. One of the places in the U.S. that does programmatic television, not like digital, but programmatic, it's got 3 billion cable availabilities each month. The biggest issue that goes above and beyond just the infrastructure, because we've looked at it at Xaxis, about 50% of our campaigns are video in both UK and United States. It's being able to do reach and frequencies between the two. You can't report on the two. It just, you can't blend them together. And the only way that's actually going to happen at some point is with addressable television. But as it spreads and gets beyond the 5%. But one of the things we're missing, and I worked for Turner 1979. Larry, were you born then? I was. But anyway, just kidding around. It was a great organization then. It's a terrific organization now. And Ted Turner had me convinced that the networks would be out of business by 1990. And I believed it. I really believed him. But if you look at the networks today, they're alive and well. In fact, they're predicting a great upfront season right now.
It's already started.
It's already started. And the biggest next issue is going to be whether the executives want to put their inventory in there or not. And if anybody read the book by Ken Aletta, Googled, Mel Karmazin, who was president of CBS, went to visit Larry Page and Sergey. And he said, "You're effing up the magic. Stop this automation. Over my dead body, am I ever going to automate?" And I think you still have a lot of that within the television industry that do not want any type of automation. They want it to be done by relationship. And if you talk to most of the network buyers out there, there's no way they want this to happen.
So the network buyers, there's maybe a dozen guys, I think they're all guys, mostly guys, who are controlling the network television dollars. And I've heard them say, over my dead body, you're going to automate my job. So it's both the sellers at the top and the buyers at the top that are some resistance to this.
Many of them are hoping they can retire before they have to do it.
Yeah, we've seen that movie. Very interesting. Tim, you look like you've got something to say there.
Yeah, no, I was just going to comment on something that Larry said a minute ago, which is that a lot of the automation is happening in the upfront planning part of this, and then getting the inventory into platforms like ours the linear inventory into platforms like ours is still a little ways away, I think, because the execution is still manual. So even if we bring packages from Larry from CNN and TNT and TBS into our platform, we become kind of a storefront for that, and it's a great way to kind of merchandise that to digital buyers. But at the end of the day, ultimately, if someone says, "Oh yeah, I'd like that," the execution is still going to be picking up the phone or whatever piece of that the last mile is, that's still going to be manual for the delivery and execution.
Yeah, we certainly look at it as a unified marketplace, right? So we have retail sales channel where we have sellers going out, talking to clients every day, trying to get the best price for media and scatter. But then if we have this digital storefront, if you will, that we're basically showcasing similar inventory around an audience, and they're willing to pay more for that, that's a great opportunity for us to create additional yield and expand our sales channel. So that's how we think about it. We're not really thinking about it like, oh, I want to automate from start to finish. We're trying to think about how do I make a better mousetrap with regards to demand and create even more demand in a scarce market.
I think there's an interesting approach to, just from the perspective of some of our larger marketers who buy a ton of linear and they're trying to move more into digital because people are paying less attention to TV, right? And so right now, the kind of truth of identity out there is a cookie. So step one is you have to tie somebody you know about to a cookie. Step two is probably how do you overlay a device graph on that user and understand that he's more than a cookie, he's 3 or 4 different devices, and tie him to a universal record. But if you think about Nielsen, they have a panel, and they have mid-minute meter data on what people watch, and that panel, the composition of that panel is known. They're people. Those people can be mapped with a Nielsen identity to a cookie. That cookie can be mapped to Axiom to understand income and to Polk to understand if they're in market. So I think a lot of the way big marketers are thinking about this right now is, let me figure out the truth of my audience. Let me understand that I am going to reach most of them on linear to get scale. But let me know that when GRPs get up to a point where at 80% penetration they're off the charts, maybe I can expand that through digital reach extension. Right, find those exact audiences, through the Trade Desk or Xaxis or however, and that makes a lot of sense for now, right?
I was talking with NBC and ramping up for this, and the guy in charge there, Aaron, said they're going to have inventory up on some kind of a menu system within about a year. And I asked him, what about data? Because you've got Comcast set-top box data inside your company. And he said, we're going to put the inventory up first and then we're going to put the data up maybe a year later. Now, they're already talking about optimizers and things like that they'll have internally, but he's talking about data following, and yet we're talking about situations right now, Dave Morgan Simul Media, where they're overlaying data on top of buys right now. So it's chicken or egg, which is going to come first, the inventory or the data? Because I've heard you guys intimate that we're going to be able to, in effect, make strategic television buys where data is connected to whatever buy that we make a lot sooner than maybe we'll have a lot of inventory up there.
We're doing it simultaneously. So the inventory that we'll put into a digital storefront will be a package of media and data. It won't be one or the other. Just given the way inventory management works today, we need to be able to predict when the audiences are going to appear in what shows, and so we're going to be creating, these packages that can be transacted on. But separating them, it would be a huge challenge for us, given the way the back end of our infrastructure operates today. And also, the fact that programming changes, like things change very quickly, especially in live television. We aren't at a place where we can do the type of granular delivery that we would do in digital.
And there's a paradigm shift here too, because if you think about it, television always priced at high rates in prime time. And of course, higher ratings, which is a data point, but now you're talking about a lot more sophisticated data. And I would posit that as the data is tied to the programs and will allow for a much higher rate to be achieved, that you'll see that inventory be made available. And by the way, NBC has always been the leader in doing forward-thinking things with their inventory and embracing new technologies, but there's still so much manual labor attached to even the system or the dashboard that you suggested, Dave. It's nothing like what we have in digital programmatic today.
Well, that's the way that programmatic started in digital, though, too. Before we had exchanges, Right Media was calling itself an exchange, but it was much more manual than the exchanges that we have today. So, a step at a time, I guess. But the data is very interesting. Are we imagining that we're going to be overlaying MRI data, Siemens data, and things like that for strategic buying purposes, or are we going to be able to bring in first-party data? Which is going to happen first from that standpoint?
Well, what we've been seeing from a lot of big advertisers is really super interesting. We work with Warner Brothers, and I guess a better example might be take HBO for example. So they have a lot of trailers and their online video, and basically months and months before a show comes out or a new season comes out, they can look at the audience composition who's viewed a video to completion and say, here are the people most interested in that audience. And then that really informs the way they even go after their subscriber strategy and think about investment. And why HBO went over the top and why Roku exists and why Samba TV is there is because in the traditional world, someone who makes really great content is at arm's length from his subscriber. So Showtime a few years ago was looking at HBO and saying, wow, they have all their own subscriber data, and I'm sitting here and Cablevision won't give me access to my people who are the ones watching my shows. So I think the data dynamic is marketers are going to use available data first and panel-based data, but they're very quickly starting to understand that having that one-to-one customer relationship is what's going to drive future value, and they're not going to give that up. They're going to make huge investments just to capture that data, and then everything going forward, and maybe it's 10 years away, will be based on that one-to-one first-party data relationship.
We're doing audience buys today in linear. I mean, a mutual client of ours is Warner Brothers. They have first-party data in Flickster. They basically know genres. They basically have segmented their audiences. They've done a lot of work with Krux to create audiences by these various categories. And we were able to bring that data into our system, and then we modeled it out. We predicted where those audiences would show up. We created a lookalike model on top of it, and then we built an optimized schedule for them based on that data, and then ran it. So at the 30-minute blocks, right? I mean, that is pretty advanced compared to what they would have done previously, which is, oh, this show is gonna, we think 18 to 34 women.
Okay.
Where is that, it's
So,
completely.
so for the web people that are here, all right, just a little background. Historically, when you've gone out to buy television, you bought programs, and then they estimated the audience, and then if it was an upfront buy, they would make a guarantee against that audience. So it was program buying, and then figuring out what the audience might be, and then it'd say, put a stake in the ground and say, okay, I'll guarantee that audience. Now we're talking about, even though we're not into programmatic, we're talking about flipping it on its head, and we're talking about buying audience. And then if you don't deliver the audience, you'll add some additional programs into it. So that really flipping the paradigm as to how we buy national television in the U.S., and that's going to happen before we really automate everything.
But wait a second. When you're selling like that, you're still delivering a whole bunch of audience that isn't in the target. It's not like
that's
it's
correct.
not like digital where you can reach all women, 18 to 49. You have maybe a very specific demo that's within that audience, but you're still reaching the rest. So
Yeah.
it's really not changing.
So, but what we are doing is increasing the composition of that target versus what you would get with just targeting demo in the same time slot. So we're optimizing the audience against the entire portfolio and then recommending 30-minute time blocks based on program, day part, et cetera, where that audience is going to over-index.
Yeah, but even still, the more narrow you target, the larger the waste will be outside of that target. So if you get adults 18 plus, there's not going to be too much.
It all comes down to the result that we drive for the client, right? So if we target this specific audience and there is waste, but if we're over delivering the result for them by 25% more than what they would have gotten by buying just the demo, it's worth it.
Yeah, no argument with that. I don't think we're arguing the effectiveness of television versus video. But I'm just saying in terms of the sophistication we have in digital, you're trying to get there, but every time you put a commercial up in television, there's a huge amount of waste of people who have absolutely no interest in ever buying the product.
Well, that's an interesting separate discussion because, in fact, if you do a lot of analysis, you find that there are, for many products, as many people outside of the target audience who buy the product as people inside the target audience. So the one advantage that television has is it reaches, they're not as heavy a purchaser. There are many more people to get that volume, right? But they still exist, and one thing that television does is reaches people who aren't exactly in the target audience but are like those. Benefit.
See, I think TV doesn't want better measurement, and when Dave Morgan was talking about sort of global frequency management in TV, it was really stunning because we're starting to get there in digital, and like someone like Kellogg's, they have a frequency target of between 7 and 10, and they know that's after 11 impressions, the 12th and the 13th don't matter, and they're just waste, right?
Yep.
And then they could light up the data, they can use ComScore, and they can go to a bright roll and say, hey guys, you're over-delivering against my audience. You're serving 50 impressions a month, and I only need 10. And Bright Roll doesn't want to hear that, but they're bound to this measurement that we're all a part of, right? But I think what's the problem with TV is if you told a TV company that they're over-delivering, and I mean, I've seen like 45 Jeep ads in the last 30 days. Maybe I only need 2 to watch to completion for me to be in the consideration set. They don't want to get anywhere near that, and as you said, the problem's political, right?
We're actually modeling on reach and frequency as part of our predictive model, which is extremely valuable for us from an inventory standpoint. Because again, the more we target in on a specific audience, we can free up inventory of a different audience for another client. So we're trying, again, it all comes back to inventory management, which TV didn't have to be as sophisticated as we did in digital, but now we need to be, because there is scarcity. And so we have to figure out how to extract more value, which we're hoping that this is going to really help us do that.
The minute you start to add these additional dimensions to what you're selling against versus just age and gender, it becomes a really interesting puzzle for folks like Turner to figure out from an inventory management perspective. Because now when you narrow that target, you do create waste in certain situations. But you can still deliver against the demo guarantees while also still adding this additional dimension that hopefully is going to yield a higher CPM for you from the client, because you're allowing for that more granular targeting, which is what digital's been really good at for the last several years. It's providing that level of granularity of targeting. It's not going to be anything like picking impression by impression like we do in the kind of programmatic digital ecosystem, but I think it's a step in the right direction, moving away from the same old age and gender targets and guarantees that we've been doing for so long.
What about the pipes? Are we imagining that the networks are going to build something where they're going to sell directly, or is there going to be a place for you and the tube moguls of the world? Do you want to sell directly to the buyers and have them just be on your interface, or is the buyer going to want to be on an interface where they can look at all networks, and they're going to need somebody like the Trade Desk or Tube Mogul? As a result, will there need to be exchanges where you put the inventory up, an intermediary? Will we need all these various layers, or can we cut a few out in going to television?
Well, I mean, we certainly would like to build it our own and have our own closed platform and be just like Facebook. However, I don't think that's realistic, because buyers make choices. They choose a DMP, they choose a DSP. So I want to create a unified marketplace that can enable the buyer to buy the way they want to buy, and still enables us to create value. But it's complicated, right? Because the back-end system, again, we have many, many years before that gets plumbed in a way that will make those transactions very seamless. So this storefront concept is a whole lot easier for us to execute. I could put a storefront up inside of every DSP within a couple weeks, right? As long as the APIs are all similar and our data is being able to push out effectively.
There are clients today that are bringing programmatic digital buying in-house. I predict those will fail, that within 3 to 5 years, they'll all be back in the hands of experts that know how to really leverage these platforms. And I think the same thing is going to hold true for television, that there will be some exchanges out there, maybe more than one, that will operate independently of any of the clients and perhaps the agencies, but they'll still need the agencies to leverage those platforms in a way that will create effective and efficient television video buying.
I think one of the things that challenge that is that we're in a position where we're building branded content that's informed by data and fan base, expertise, understanding. How is a fan of Robot Chicken interacting with social media? How are they consuming content? What are they reacting to when we put a branded piece of content in front of them? We're in a really unique position to distribute the brand's content from the inside out and make sure that we're delivering it correctly in linear across a schedule that makes sense, but then also through these other digital channels. And I don't know from the buyer perspective yet if the intermediary agency can do that completely, and that the client that has sophisticated data sets, they want to participate in that content creation process. So it's going to take some time to figure that out, but it's an interesting situation.
The question is what percentage will be programmatic, and I certainly didn't say 100%. But look at ESPN today. I mean, that's a model for Turner, right? They sell packages. In fact, about 85% of their revenue is their magazine, their digital, their television, their stores, their radio. It's all packaged up. How is that going to be sold programmatically? That's a long way down the road.
Yeah. Questions out here? Yes. Sure, but not one of ours. Right here behind you.
The question I have, and this is for the whole room, is wastage. Let's take the automotive industry. I saw briefs for over 10 years targeting 25 to 40-year-old audience. We can now target them specifically and digitally. But who's the decider? Who's the buyer? Who's the end user? Who's the gatekeeper? And who's the influencer? If the 55-year-old husband bought the car and his wife drives the car and the son did all the research on the internet to tell the father and the mother what car to drive, and the kids are giving the pest of power saying, I don't want to be in a non-cool car, what is wastage in this formula?
That's a really interesting question. And I didn't mean to suggest, Larry, that TV is the bad guy and they're afraid of measurement. I think you're going to the market the right way. I think the problem with marketers is now they're saying, hey, I know who my customer is. Now you go find them for me. And then on the back end, I'm going to do a media mix model and see, did TV get them there? Did digital? Did online video? Did mobile? And they're trying to figure that out. I think what's happening now, especially with regard to real addressable TV inside cable boxes, is you can set basically an IP address for the box, and then I can understand, because I can see household membership in the households, who those individuals were. I can map that back to media exposure, and then I can have a fairly good understanding of who's the purchaser and maybe even who's the influencer in the house. The problem is these media mix models we've developed so far are very antiquated, and they don't use the granular log-level user data that can inform better measurement. And we've seen people like Nielsen kind of go that way with their purchase of Xlate to get more granular user data in the digital space, and stuff we're doing with the Turner is kind of getting on the right path to making that measurement more real and more people-based rather than broadly demographic-based.
Anybody else out here? Okay, well, we're gonna wrap, maybe give a minute back or two, because the whole thing is behind and we got to get done with the day. Any final thoughts here?
I mean, I think it's exciting where we're at with all this stuff. There's a long way to go, but I think we've made a lot of strides, and I think there's going to be some interesting stuff to come. I think consumers are shifting the way that they're watching content, and I think that's going to play out interestingly over the next couple of years in the OTT and streaming space, and all the cool stuff that folks like Turner are doing is I think, all a step in the right direction towards a more addressable world for all of this.
I would say that, a lot of what we've been hearing today is how we're thinking about the world is it has to be consumer first. If you put the consumer at the front of the decision and you think about them with regard to ad load, with regard to the content that you're putting in front of them, what advertisers are being contextually deployed in front of them, I think all of those things will help create better experiences and ultimately better results for clients.
We've got a long ways to go, but we're making progress.
Yeah.
And I would just add that the infrastructure is probably one of the more gating aspects of what you would call programmatic television as compared to digital overall. But what's happening in the industry, if you just look at set-top box and the FCC in the United States calling for an open box, the biggest issue that cable networks, the networks overall, have to face up, and it's a very big, dangerous area, is the subscriber fees that they've been getting for their programming, because the business is going to go to a la carte, and it's going to go very, very quickly. And all of a sudden, a company like ESPN that has way more subscriber fees than they have advertising dollars is going to find itself with 70% of the distribution they used to have, or less, because it's offered a la carte. It will create whole new set of dynamics that could actually increase the speed that the industry becomes addressable, because it goes over the top a lot more quickly than we think.
Okay, you heard her here first. Short Disney.
Short.
Thanks.